though acting out of self-interest characterizes both the wolf and the hireling, and though there are often some other notable similarities between the two, there are also notable distinctions between the wolf and the hireling. Jesus implied this by what he said in John chapter 10, verses 12 and 13. The epitome of a wolf in sheep's clothing is someone who looks and sounds the part of a genuine shepherd of Christ, though they are on the prowl for their own gratification, which is usually tied to a personal agenda. As a general rule, the thing that distinguishes the hireling from the wolf is that the hireling isn't really on the prowl like the wolf. The hireling is rather content to do his service he has been hired to do, take his pay, and go home. The hireling is not normally looking to infiltrate other groups. This is a key reason why a faithful shepherd of Christ doesn't have to directly contend against all of the false churches in his area. Nevertheless, even if the faithful shepherd doesn't face much opposition from local churches, he will still inevitably have to contend with wolves on the prowl from longer distances and wolves rising up from within his own group. Hirelings are reflections of the specific group which has hired them. In order to be such, they will often compromise personal convictions. Hearing a church leader say that he doesn't endorse sin and false doctrine which are prevailing right within his own church is basically an admission that he is a hireling. A faithful shepherd of Christ will not tolerate sin nor false doctrine within his own church. The hireling may flatter himself that at least the people actively corrupting the church didn't get their wicked ideas directly from him. A wolf in sheep's clothing is actually much more likely to confront sin and false doctrine than a hireling, when such are not part of his own brand of acceptable sin and or false doctrine. A true shepherd of Christ will warn about wolves in sheep's clothing, while the wolf in sheep's clothing will also warn about wolves in sheep's clothing, and he will include the faithful shepherd of Christ among that number, since a true shepherd of Christ would attempt to deliver the wolf's prey out of his mouth. The hireling may also warn of wolves in sheep's clothing, yet he will typically be much quicker to avoid confrontation. Both the faithful shepherd and the wolf in sheep's clothing have the will to fight with wolves who threaten the work they are involved in. The wolf in sheep's clothing will fight with these as competition for prey. The faithful shepherd fights wolves in faithfulness to his master, like David fought the lion and the bear away from his father's sheep to honor his father. There is such a thing as hirelings without jobs, wolves without prey, and faithful shepherds without current assignments in terms of overseeing others. The faithful shepherd won't compromise in fellowship, nor is he reliant on external validation. Beware then of assuming that there are no Lone Ranger Christians, and don't assume that someone is not walking right because they are currently not part of a church. Calling someone a hireling or a wolf in sheep's clothing is an implicit statement that those sitting under their teaching ought to get away from them and reject their authority. Yet it's incredible that even some who rightfully admit that their own spiritual leaders are hirelings or wolves in sheep's clothing still don't flee from them.